After months of waiting and slow progress, it is time to light the first fire in the old coal forge over here in the new off-grid shop. Well, that's it. We've got a fire, and the chimney draws as well as it ever has. We'll talk a little bit more about the side draft forge hood and my particular installation here and the hand crank versus electric blower. But first, let's actually use this fire and make something. And since I've had carving wooden spoons on my mind lately, let's just forge an iron spoon. Nice cooking spoon. I'm going to make this spoon out of some 1/4 by 1 inch flat bar. That's roughly 6 millimeter by 25 millimeter flat bar. Just plain old mild steel. And I want to start by isolating the mass that will be the spoon from the section that will be the handle. Trying to work right over the edge of the anvil here and line up the edge of the hammer with the edge of the anvil. This is someplace a spring fuller or a guillotine tool, like a Smith & Magician, with fullering dies would be really nice. Sounds like a couple more tools we're going to need to make for this little shop. It's a little awkward to get in there and clean up that shoulder. Definitely need to make, at the very least, a spring fuller that fits this anvil. See if I can kind of work the corners back and round that up a little bit. I always feel like I see details watching the video back like this that I don't see when I'm actually forging. So there's a little bit of some of that upset that could become cold shuts. Won't be a big deal in a spoon, but if you're making a knife or an axe, something like that, those areas where it's pushing back on itself could become a problem. You really see this anvil bounce. That's the anvil and the stump all together moving as I work over the horn. That's one reason why setting the anvil on the ground or bolting it to a concrete floor really helps keep things solid. That's all just wasted energy. But there is no movement working straight down on the face, so the whole mounting system is solid. It's just that you can move the entire thing when you're working out off the end like that. Crosspeen is a great way to spread this. Start at the middle and then work towards one side, then go back to the middle and work towards the other side. As this gets thinner, it cools off fast, but you can still do a fair amount of work with it as it's getting down into a black heat. And working colder does knock off the scale and keeps it from forming again, so it's a good way to clean things up. Looks like I got a little carried away. That little ear that formed will be something to file or grind off later. I'm going to go ahead and cut this off to a length I think will be comfortable. Would have been better to break that off instead of cutting all the way through on the Hardy, but I don't think I actually hit the hammer on the Hardy. I'm going to go ahead and draw the end of this out into a little rat tail, and that'll make a nice ring handle we can hang this from either in the kitchen or from your cooking tripod if you're using this around the campfire. Started off square, then we go to octagon and then round. Although you could leave this in a square or an octagon cross section if you'd like to. Just a little curl, because I think it's a good way to end something like this. A ring like this is easy to do with a jig or over a little cone mandrel, but it's good practice to do these over the horn of the anvil and try and get them as perfectly round as you can. So I'm going to fiddle with this for a little bit, just for the sake of practice. Doesn't hang the spoon up any better, but it does look a lot better if it's perfectly round. And just knock the corners off the edges to make the handle more comfortable to hold on to. I'm going to let that cool so I can do some filing or grinding on it and get it all cleaned up before I shape the bowl of the spoon itself. So this is a great time to talk about the coal forge with the side draft hood, a hand blower, and what I actually did for a chimney. Now this is the same forge and hood that were in the other shop. This is a bottom blast forge, meaning the air comes up from the bottom, but it's a side draft hood, meaning it sits to the side of the fire instead of over the fire. And this is generally superior to an overhead hood. A coal forge brings in a lot of room air, vast amounts, way more room air than it really does smoke, and that all goes up the chimney regardless of what kind of chimney you have. With an overhead forge hood, that's taking in more room air, and it goes directly up into the hood, way up in here, instead of down at the level of the fire. The lower the hood is, the better it performs. But that allows a lot of the smoke to escape because it's choked with room air, and all the smoke can't make it up the chimney in some cases. If you got a big enough diameter chimney, and if it's tall enough so that it draws really well, that does help that situation. But the side draft forge hood, all that room air that's coming in has to go across the fire, and that pushes the smoke with it in a lot of cases, and therefore it draws much more efficiently than an overhead hood does. People often ask if I have some sort of a draft inducer or fan in the chimney. I do not. This is all just natural air currents, and this would perform better if it was larger. This is a 10-inch pipe. It's got about 12 feet of chimney above it, and it draws pretty well, but it is not 100% perfect. So you need lots of fresh air, lots of ventilation in the shop. Some of the smoke does escape out the sides and it goes out the door or through the open eaves of the shop, which is one reason I generally keep the eaves of my shop open, just to have a place for that little bit extra smoke to escape. Now for the last 20 years or so, I've been using an electric blower with this forge so that I can do something else while the fire is heating up in the morning, or if I've got a big bar in there that's going to take a while, I can clean off the anvil or get out the chisel I need or whatever tooling we're going to use for the next heat, and it's a real convenient thing with an electric blower. The downside to doing that is if you leave something in a coal fire too long, you will absolutely burn it up. It's not like a gas forge that can be set to a certain heat and not really go above that heat in most cases. So there's a real risk with a coal forge. That's one of the advantages of a hand crank blower, especially if you're a beginner. You're not likely to burn things up because you walked off and got distracted, or the tool that you went over to the workbench to get wasn't on the workbench and you had to go over here to get it or over there, and you took longer looking for it than you thought you were going to. But the downside is exactly the opposite. You got to stand here and crank the blower. Noisy. And while that can be really satisfying to do, especially if you're a beginner, people love to crank the blower, it does take more time and it is way less efficient than having an electric blower in the forge. So this is going to take some time for me to get used to. By the way, the fire pot in the forge is a cast iron fire pot. This one is a Centaur Vulcan. There are lots of antique fire pots out there that are still in good usable shape, and a lot of the other blacksmith manufacturers have their version of a cast iron fire pot. The cast iron ones will last much longer than a fabricated steel one, but if you fabricate one out of 1/2-inch plate, it'll probably last you most of your blacksmithing career. Now, because a coal forge is drawing a lot of room air, the column of smoke is never as hot as the column of smoke would be in something like a wood stove. This is really relatively cool as chimneys go. You can actually put your hand on here, and that is not hot, even up here where it's more concentrated. So it's not really a big risk of chimney fires. In theory, clearances to the building may not be as important, and I say may not be because I have no way to test that. What I will say is most places that have building codes and fire inspectors, they don't understand any of that. What they expect is that this is installed just like a wood stove would be, and that means a wood stove chimney. Lots of people that don't have to deal with inspectors put in single pipe, but there's a little bit of a risk. If I'm wrong about my theory here, that could put your shop at risk. I go with the best practice, the one that's going to keep the building inspectors happy, the ones that would keep the fire inspectors happy, and if I ever have a fire, the one that's going to keep the insurance company happy and hopefully pay for the damage from the fire. Because if you burn down your shop and you didn't have a proper code-approved chimney installed, insurance company's probably not going to pay for it. So this is a Class A wood stove chimney. It's a 2300 degree insulated chimney pipe. So it's double wall with ceramic fiber batting in between. It's an expensive chimney. This is over $2,000 worth of chimney pipe just to get this little bit of chimney in with the roof boot and all the adapters, fittings, things like that. So it's really an expensive way to go, but you won't regret it if the building inspector ever shows up. Now again, cool column of air because of all the room air going up the chimney means that your smoke is cooling down as it goes up. It's heat that draws the smoke up the chimney. If you have a single wall pipe, just a big 12-inch piece of mild steel pipe or tubing, whatever you want to find, whatever it is you could find, and you've got a cold day out, it's midwinter and it's 20 degrees outside, that pipe is cooling that column of smoke off, and it is not going to draw as well. Because of the insulated pipe, this stays warmer on the inside, therefore it draws better, therefore it vents more smoke. So that's another benefit of doing it this way. Ever since I put in my very first coal forge, this is the way I've done my chimneys, and hopefully this is the last time I ever have to install one. But now this is cooled off enough, I'm going to go ahead and draw a nice little egg shape on here that will make a nice little spoon. Then I'll get this hot, we'll go to the swedge block, and we'll get this project finished. You can do all this shaping with a file if you want to, cut it on a bandsaw, grind it, all sorts of different ways you can do this. But I'm going to try this big old shear just because it happens to be hanging on the wall in the back of the shop. I think it needs sharpening. And everything can be done with a hand file. Need to get rid of that spot I drew out a little bit too far. Of course, if you have some sort of power grinding equipment, you might as well use that to your advantage. So I'm going to do a lot of this with the angle grinder just to get it done more efficiently. On the other hand, sometimes the file is just the best tool for the job. Easier to get the angles and put a little bit of a bevel in here. Clean up any rough spots in the handle so there's nothing sharp or snaggy. I'm going to curve the handle a little bit. You can see the sun shining right on the swedge block. That's coming through the shop door in the afternoon. There's more heat in that bar than it looks like. You can't really see heat in bright sunshine. So it's a good idea if your shop is a little bit in shadows, just so you can see things like that better. But the sun does affect it in here, and as the sun goes away, it tends to get darker. The camera sees that way worse than the human eye does, though. I did not size this spoon to specifically fit a depression on this swedge block. It probably would have been better if I had, but I can work around different depressions and just adapt, and we'll still get a good spoon out of this. Got to drop it at least once. And here comes the sun back from behind a cloud. It's going to get bright again. A little bit of beeswax to finish it, help prevent rust. There's still plenty to do to get this little shop fully operational. But with the coal forge up and running, I think we're going to see a lot more videos over here. I can't promise that there'll be 50% of the videos done in this shop and 50% in the other shop. We'll just see how it goes, and it depends on what the project is. Some things are better suited for the coal forge, And some of the projects that I really want to work on in the long run are better suited for the gas forge, the induction forge, and of course the shop that's got the power hammer, the press, and all that other stuff. But I am going to try and mix it up as much as I can, and we're going to see this shop a lot more. I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. I hope you have a time in your day to get out to your shop, make something, stay safe, wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next video.